my other books, I'm always like crying because I'm like so traumatized for my characters. But for the first time in my writing career, I was like tearing up because I was just so happy.
Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're a new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fully Booked. As you can see, we have another guest here with us on the podcast today. Everyone, say hello to June Hur. Thank you again for agreeing to be on.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get into just talking about your writing journey and, of course, the newest upcoming book. I actually did get a chance to meet her once in person last year, so I have had a chance to hear a little bit of your story. But for those of you who might not have heard of you, read your books yet, I kind of want to just try to start beginning. So I was actually wondering how you made your way into publishing.
I first started writing when I was around 13. I really got into Pride and Prejudice, and I wrote Pride and Prejudice fan fiction. And yeah, for a while I just wrote fan fiction like Pride and Prejudice, and then it was like anime. And then when I moved to Korea, like the Korean education system is such where you're kind of stuck in school from the morning until around 10 p.m. because there's something called a self-studying period. And so I didn't really know the language. I didn't know what to do with my time because it was a struggle to study in a different language. And so that's when I just kind of started writing my own original fiction. And it really helped it was like an informal therapy session for me. And yeah, I fell in love with writing, and I was just like, you know what? Like, I don't know what to do with my future, but I know I really love writing, so maybe I'll become an author. And so that's kind of when the idea to pursue publication took root.
And then actually going from there, how long did it actually take you to get published? I know there was a bit of a period of time where, you're writing lots of drafts, sending out, trying to find an agent, all that stuff in the process.
Mm-hmm. It took me 10 years. So for a while I wrote British historicals, and, I queried to agents, ended up with like over 100 rejections. It wasn't really going anywhere. And so around 2016, that's when I fell in love with Korean history. And I was just like, you know what? Like this history is fascinating. Let me just write a book, a Korean historical fiction, as a love letter to Korean history. And during that time, there weren't too many books out there with Korean representation, especially Korean historical representation. This was before even Pachinko was published. There was only a handful of Korean like books with like Korean history in it in the young adult market as well. And so I didn't think I would get published, but I wrote it anyway. And that's kind of when doors started to open for me. So yeah, I'd say like give or take 10 years.
And actually, what made you specifically want to start writing Korean historicals? Because you mentioned what you wrote before. So there's this, I guess, switch or transition.
So for most of my life, I was really into British history. So when I was in university, I majored in history with a focus on British history, and then literature. I majored in literature as well with a focus on British literature. And I thought I would always write about British history. But then after, 10 years of rejection, I was just like, you know what, I need to take a break. And I did it whenever I tried to write about a British historical fiction, like it just drew up all the memories of all the rejections I received. And so I was just like, I want to start a fresh new chapter in my life, in my writing career. And so I was like, what history should I look into? So I looked into like Canadian history, but I was just like, no. And then American and like different parts of the world. And I kept looking at different global histories, but I was just like, why am I avoiding Korean history? I'm Korean. And so I think there was some kind of like, just a lot of internalized things that kind of made me avoid Korean history for a while. But then finally, I was just like, let's just give it a chance. And so I picked up this translation of a Korean historical fiction called Mannam, which is the English title is Encounter, and the author is Han Moo-suk. And this is a old classic in Korea, and even like I spoke with others in Korea, and even they don't really know about this book. So it's like really old and really really old classic. And I read the preface of that novel that was giving kind of uh, a brief, a general overlook into 19th century Korea, and that's when I was just like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea that this was what historical Korea looked like. And so I fell deeply in love with it, and that's kind of when I began researching a bit more. And I was just like, you know what, I I really want more people to know about Korean history and experience the fascination and the joy that I've experienced while studying.
Hmm. Actually, that makes me curious because I know you've published several books now. I think the newest one will be actually your fifth published
Mhm.
Korean historical. How has the reception been to each of these books you've written? And again, kind of, yeah, noting some of the lack of Korean historical representation there was, and how do you think people are responding to each of the books you've written?
Mm. I think yeah, there's like way more Korean rep now. Like I think once I started around 2020 was when I first had my debut novel published. And then from there on, I started to see more Korean representation, which is amazing. So I think, yeah, like it was my debut novel, it was received well, but there's no romance in it. So it was a bit difficult to market, but it found its audience. And I have readers who read my debut novel who have been following me throughout my career. And I'm so grateful for that. And then there was my sophomore novel, which was the hardest book I had to write. Um, I've actually reread all of my books except my sophomore novel. I think I'm just so like traumatized and stressed out by it. Um, but it was also received well. And but I think my most like the book that kind of broke me out as an author and like helped me reach a wider audience was The Red Palace. That was like my most fast-paced court thriller novel, and it had a bit of romance in it. And so it was my most popular. And then from there on, A Crane Among Wolves, that was published, and that one hit the New York Times. And I think Behind Five Willows might it probably be my biggest book because it's getting a bigger print run. Yeah, and it's like more romance heavy, so it's easier to market. And it's like the pitch is easier, like Pride and Prejudice set in Korea. It's like it's so easy to market. So I think that one will do good. Yeah, so it's been like for someone like myself who thought I would never be able to publish my first debut novel, I'm really grateful for the support this my Korean historical fiction has received. And I think, yeah, like it just shows that people really want to learn about non-Western history, that there's a hunger there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely seeing that too. So going along this journey, actually, were there any moments that you kind of feel like you really made it as an author from, like that first published novel to like now? Is there
Um,
anything that kind of, yeah, sticks out in your memory?
I mean, for many authors, our dream is always to hit the New York Times. And that was always my dream going in, but a dream I thought I'd never be able to achieve. But then when Crane hit the New York Times, I think, honestly, I think it's that benchmark of, what is success. It always keeps moving. So unless you are able to be content with the situation you're in, it's really hard to be like, once I hit reach this benchmark, going to be I'm going to consider myself successful and I'm going to be content with my career. It's never you never reach that point, I think, unless no matter your circumstance in the industry, like you find some kind of um, way to find your worth in just being able to create and produce, and rather than tying your identity to like external things out of our control. And yeah, and honestly, like the New York Times bestseller list, it's not merit based. Like I didn't hit it because I'm an amazing writer. It's like it's a lot about luck. and also industry support, and just like timing in general. So, so yeah, like I'm trying to learn to see success. Like over my career, my success, I see success as, am I still able to write for a living? That's what I consider success. Like, do I continue to have publishing support? Are my readers still there for me? I think, like, if I can continue to write books for a living, I think that is successful to me.
Actually, considering what you just said, would you say then that at this point in time in your career, like, are you writing more for yourself or for the reader, or is it kind of like a balance of those
Hmm.
two?
Oh, that's a good question. All right, so a part of me does think about the reader now. So it's like now I would not really consider writing a book that has no romance in it, because a huge majority of my readership really love the romance that I kind of weave into my book. But then another part of me, the majority of me, I write for myself. So, for example, I wrote Behind Five Willows. It's a light and fluffy historical romance, and I think it will do really well. And if I was writing for the readers who have, who have been really enjoying this book, and if I was writing for, let's say, success, I would actually, the right course of action would be to write another historical romance that's a bit more lighthearted. Instead, I'm just like, you know what? Like, there's this one history, this one event in Korean history that's really calling to me, and it's super dark. So my next book following Behind Five Willows is going to be like one of my darkest books. And there will probably barely be any romance in it. So yeah, like I think 10% of me, like I still think I still want to cater to my audience. Like I want to write a book that they'll enjoy, but the majority of me, I write the book that I want to. I read the book where like the history is something I want to explore a bit more.
I mean, I was gonna say I am a little biased. I'm still mainly a romance reader, and that was part of the reason why I was interested in picking up Behind Five Willows in the first place. But yeah, actually, other than that, I think I was following you even on social media for maybe a year, and it was still amazing to see, I guess, kind of all the hype around some of your previous books. I think especially with A Crane Among Wolves, how well received it was, and it's a good point to kind of segue to talking a bit more about Behind Five Willows. And actually, obviously, you already mentioned the Pride and Prejudice aspect of it a bit, but I was curious, I think maybe besides that, what else kind of sparked the idea for Behind Five Willows and that the
Hmm.
story?
So I wanted to write a Korean historical version of Pride and Prejudice. But I think the issue I kept coming across was, if you think about it, all the historical K dramas are basically like Pride and Prejudice. It's about, a lot of the historicals are about, a poorer girl and a richer man who is like cold and proud, and they have that enemies to lovers vibe, and then they end up together. And so I'm like, and there's, there's the yearning and the um the reserve and the social reserve and the restraint that would give off Pride and Prejudice vibes. So I'm just like, it's not just enough for me to do a straight retelling. I need to layer it somehow to make it my own. And so for me, like, even though I'm writing a romance, I wanted to somehow feature history as the main character, as history is in all my books. And so I thought, just one day I was like, what was going on in Korea around the time when Jane Austen was writing Pride and Prejudice? Because I always found it interesting that the Regency era, Victorian era England, there's a lot of parallels with Chosun Dynasty Korea, especially the latter half of that era. Like, the moral the with the way that people would put women and their morality on a pedestal, the importance of chastity. I found that parallel really interesting. And so I was like, what was happening across the globe? And so, I looked into 1790s Korea, because Jane Austen wrote Pride and Prejudice around 1796. So in 1790s Korea, I realized that there was actually a book banning going on in Joseon Dynasty Korea, and that immediately sparked this memory that I had when I was back in my Jane Austen seminar when I was at the University of Toronto, and my professor was talking about how novels in Jane Austen's period was kind of looked down upon. They were seen as disagreeable, and that novels had the capacity to morally corrupt women readers, especially. And that was the sentiment was kind of shared in Joseon Dynasty Korea. Novels were seen as dangerous. It could spread dangerous ideas. It can corrupt. So I was just like, that is fascinating. And so, as an homage not only to Pride and Prejudice but to the author herself, I was like, it would be so fascinating to take a novel, beloved novel, Pride and Prejudice, and set it in a time when novels were banned. So that's kind of how I came up with the idea for Behind Five Willows.
That's interesting. I think the point of you mentioning history as like kind of a main, character or focus, I feel like I kind of felt that. Besides the romance, the book, I felt like there were a lot of other elements going on, even just a lot of kind of focus and themes around like books. And at least for me, I felt like part of the reason like I enjoyed this story so much was because it did feel like it was for the book lovers, which is kind of funny because again, like you said, it's set in this time period of
Exactly.
censorship and
Yeah.
book bans. So trying to go a little bit deeper into it. I also loved both of the main characters in this book quite a lot. I think for me, at least, there was a lot I could relate to, actually, not just culturally, but yeah, even just them as like human beings and the emotions they experience during kind of I don't know if chaotic time is the right phrasing, but
Yeah.
something like that. Kind of curious how you felt when you were writing each of these main characters. Like, what was the thought process behind and why you even picked the professions that they were in and what story you wanted to tell of each of them.
When I thought of the book banning that was occurring in Joseon Dynasty Korea, I kind of figured I wanted the romance to revolve around the book bannings. So it took me a while of like experimenting to figure out like, okay, so I want the author to be the Korean Mr. Darcy, basically. And he writes under a pseudonym because it's very scandalous, and so he's living this double life where, in reality, in front of his father and society, he's like this very upright, reserved and proper gentleman, but behind closed doors, he's writing this super popular novel, which the king thinks is so like vulgar and yeah, just not very proper. It's just an adventure book. But back then, even fiction writing itself was banned. So yeah, and so I thought, yes, he's going to be an author, and I was struggling with the romance where it was like in Pride and Prejudice, it's kind of like it Darcy kind of falls for Elizabeth really fast. And when I was trying to capture that, I was just like, how do I write it in a way where it doesn't feel insta-lovey? So I thought, you know what if they've already created this bond before the first chapter begins? And so that's when I figured, like, I want them to already have an established relationship where they're pen pals, but they don't know that they're pen pals. And so already the bond is established, and Darcy, the Korean Darcy Sejun, falling in love with the heroine feels less, it feels more earned, I guess.
That was another aspect I loved about the book too. They kind of already had that established connection. I think that's something else a lot of readers will also enjoy about the story and like kind of the romance arc as well. Especially if you love more stories with yearning. I feel like that's what some romance readers are like craving a little bit more in different types of romance books in general. So I think that was pretty cool. There's a lot of different themes, pieces that you touched on in Behind Five Willows. And okay, confession, I haven't gotten to the rest of your backlist yet, but I'm planning to. And I know that I think some of your books are set in slightly different parts of the Joseon dynasty, because think I was looking at the Joseon Dynasty actually spans a
Yeah.
long period of
Yep,
time.
yep.
Yeah, so it's a different time period, even in Behind Five Willows compared to your last novel. So I'm kind of curious, how has the research process been for Behind Five Willows compared to some of your previous books?
I think in terms of research, this book was a little bit easier because the novel itself, it's history a bit more on a smaller scale because it's just focusing on the book ban. Um, and and whereas for my previous books, the history was a bit more like it dealt with it dealt more hands-on with like the politics and the tyranny. For example, A Crane Among Wolves, it's about the tyranny of King Yuntan, and you have a prince, so it means he has more direct access to the king. So that means more direct access to history, and so it requires much more extensive research because the history that I'm exploring was a coup. So yeah, it takes more research. It takes more um, yeah, because I don't want to get anything wrong with something that um a history of that serious of a nature. Whereas with the book banning, it is serious and horrible. But because the story leans more towards romance, like I didn't need, I don't need the main characters like confronting government officials and like confronting the king. So I didn't have to research as much. So it was a bit easier, and there's a lot of articles and books that I found that kind of touch on the censorship. So yeah, this book was hard to write in some ways, but research wise, it was easier for me.
So with some of your previous novels then, is there any collaboration then between like you and like do you consult any experts, or has most of the research just been done by yourself and articles, books?
Like sometimes I'll reach out to historians, like professors, but a lot of it is on me. Um, and like I've been fortunate enough to find a lot of great books written by either Korean professors or Korean American scholars. Um, so and like museums in Korea, so I do research whenever I go to Korea. So yeah, it's been more like a solo thing. But yeah, like having a background in studying history at the University of Toronto, like I think that kind of equipped me with the tools to know how to even begin tackling research of, from small to bigger scales. So yeah, I would love to like lean more on historians one day, but I think I'm very like timid and I don't want to burden people. So maybe one day if I get like a huge grant from the Canada Arts Council, I'll start actually like giving honorariums or something. But yeah, I don't. I feel kind of bad asking for like free labor. I'm sure they would be more than happy to, but I'm just very like, yeah, I feel bad asking. So I just look at their articles instead.
Wow, I feel like I can see that be a lot of work. So actually, how do you plan your writing process then? At least for some of these novels that might have involved a great amount of research. Like, does that extend the time that you need a lot to again do all the writing, the drafts? Like, how does the writing process usually look?
So usually I start with research. I'll begin with like a general history 101 and I'll read about the time I'm interested in, usually in English, just so I can equip myself mentally with all the terms I need to know to begin like diving into Korean resources. So yeah, I begin with like a more general research, and then as I'm drafting, I come up with more specific historical questions, and that's when I usually dive into Korean resources. And then yeah, I kind of like research as I go. But sometimes I'll take a pause on writing to do deeper research if it's required. And because I'm an author writing under a contract, for my first three books, my contract was like a year long. So I have to do a lot of research. I would begin researching before I propose the idea. And then once my book is sold, I begin drafting and researching at the same time. So even though the contract is for a year, I'd be researching for maybe like a half a year extra before I sell the book. So it takes me a year and a half, I'd say, to do the research. And for the actual writing, it takes me like several months, but not a year. But then I found that writing historical fiction, it's really hard to write in that year period. And so, yeah, I had to talk with my agent and my editor and kind of extend my timeline. So now I write a book every 2 years. So it gives me more time to research and more time to write.
Yeah, actually, I have to say, I kind of admired that you did that. I think it's something you mentioned at your talk last year too, because I feel like there's a lot of other authors that crank out even more than one book a year.
I don't know how they do it.
I don't know how they're doing
Yeah.
it, and yeah, again with the genre books that you're writing, it just makes a lot more sense to take a lot more time and just get an actual better quality novel out there in the world, compared to just trying to crank a bunch out
Yeah,
all the time.
I admire them. I don't know how they do it.
There was kind of a point I kind of want to circle back to, because I think I was watching a recent reel that you posted on your social media. I think it was about a comment or something you received from a reader about pronunciation in your novels, and yeah, different words from the Korean language that you put into each of the books. So for me, it's not that hard because I actually am fully Korean. So a lot of the language that you use, I'm like kind of used to hearing. I've heard like some of it from growing up. From people from a different background, I can see that maybe it's a little jarring at first. But I was thinking about it a bit, and I'm curious how you see it, and like the importance of having all of the terminology, the actual Korean language and words in each of your novels, and actually maybe in particular with Behind Five Willows.
So I think there are just some words in the Korean language that carry like emotional attachment that I would rather write in Korean for my sake than in English. So for example, a simple word like ajumma, that just means middle-aged woman. I could write in Behind Five Willows, I could say, oh, those middle-aged women are coming, but it doesn't hit the same as when you say, oh, those ajummas are coming. Like when you use the word ajumma, like for me, instantly it evokes this feeling of Korean ajummas and all the memories associated with like growing up with them in my life. And so when I use Korean terms in my book, usually there are either context cues about what they mean. And if there are no context cues, it usually means you don't really need to know what it means. Like you can Google it, but you don't have to know what it means. It's not important to the plot or the character development. I'm using it for my sake as a Korean who has a lot of, so that the word chung, like emotional attachment and like this deep attachment to these words that I grew up with. And so for me, like I grew up reading a lot of British historical fiction, and I remember like when I'm reading those classics, there's tons of like random French words. Back then I wouldn't even Google it, but it never impeded my understanding of the plot. It didn't impede my enjoyment. So I'm like, they did it back then. There were random French lines and things I didn't understand. And I think it's okay. I think it's okay to, yeah, just to embrace that, like as long as it's not impeding my enjoyment of the book. So I think sometimes it's just okay not to know, or if you're really curious, then to Google. But yeah, whenever I add in Korean terms, I just make sure like, did I have some context around that term to help readers understand what it means? And if not, then it just means like it's just for me. It's not for the readers, it's for me. So you could just like skim by it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that if you just want to know what they are, then actually, yeah, nowadays it's very easy to look things up. I think the point of like emotional attachment actually makes a lot of sense now, because yeah, again, I definitely felt that since I already knew what a lot of the words meant, and I can't really think of any examples right now, and I don't want to spoil for people who probably haven't read yet. But yeah, I think there were certain scenes in the book where it's like supposed to be more maybe emotional, like kind of tender-hearted, and you use some of those words too, and it kind of just reinforces, kind of sizes all the things happening and the emotions that they're feeling, that kind of Jung that you're talking about. So I definitely felt that. Hopefully some of the others will get to experience that too.
Yes.
And actually, again, I think seeing some of the things you've been posting again online. I think even doing a couple events for kind of promoting Behind Five Willows so far. Actually, how has some of the live reactions been from meeting different readers, different fans?
So I've done two events so far. One was in January. That was a book a conference for librarians. So it was just more like meeting librarians who have supported me in my work, and then they got I got to share a bit about Behind Five Willows, but they didn't read it by then. And then I did another recent one in Seoul, Korea, and half of the event I was able to talk a bit about Behind Five Willows, but no one has still read it because the Korean edition isn't out yet, and the English one isn't out yet. There was one ARC reader though, that one reader who read my ARC, and yeah, it was really, and she got me like a journal that has like a bookish theme, and so that was really lovely of her. It's always so surreal getting to meet readers who have read my work. And just really grateful overall that there are people who want to read my stories.
Yeah, I feel like from here the fan base just gonna keep growing too, as people keep discovering you as well. Okay, I did want to ask another question about Behind Five Willows and kind of the inspiration behind the title. I do remember the one poem that was in the book, but again, for the sake of things, I'm not gonna like share a bunch of the details right now. So yeah, I was curious if actually maybe if it was something, that poem or something else as well, that sparked the idea for the actual title.
Mm-hmm. There was a title before that. It was called Adoration, but my publishing team was like, they were like half and half. Half of them liked it, half of them didn't. So I had to change it. And so me and my editor and agent, we like did a bunch of brainstorming. We had a bunch of ideas. And I think it was her. I think it was my editor who mentioned that she wants to make because the romance is centered around the bookshop. We decided we want to kind of spotlight the bookshop. And so initially it was like, we're like, should we say Beyond Five Willows? And we're like, something about behind sounds better. So I actually had to write an entire new scene set behind Five Willows so I can make the title Behind Five Willows. And for the title of the name of the bookshop itself, Five Willows, it's actually inspired by a lot of the poems from China, which were really popular in Joseon Dynasty Korea. And I was reading an article and somehow came across there's also a bookshop called, I think, Five Willows in China, or like a famous poet whose nickname is Five Willows, like Five Willows Gentleman or something. And there's like historical significance behind the idea of Five Willows. And so I was just like, oh, that sounds really lovely. And because it's also a very the symbol of Five Willows is very literary. So I was just like, oh, like, there's a Five Willows. I think there are Five Willow bookshops in China. And I think because the owner of Five Willows in Korea in my book is a fan of a lot of the Chinese poets, I was just like, oh, I think it would be appropriate for her to name her bookshop Five Willows as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can kind of see those thematic ties now. And I think you're definitely right. Definitely was the right title for this story. We talked about a lot of different things. with you as an author and Behind Five Willows. There's a lot of different ideas, inspiration in it, but what are you hoping for readers to take away from Behind Five Willows, from this particular story that you were trying to tell?
The most ambitious thing that I'm hoping for is that it will somehow either recapture or like remind readers of what they felt when they first fell in love with Pride and Prejudice. Because I think that joy and the high I felt when I first read Pride and Prejudice, it's never like it's something I think about with so much nostalgia. And I really hope to kind of revive that emotion as readers read. And then for like, both readers of Pride and Prejudice and people who haven't read it, I'm really hoping to pass on the joy because when I was writing this book, I felt like a joy I've never experienced before writing any of my other books. Like my other books, I'm always like crying because I'm like so traumatized for my characters. But for Behind Five Willows, like for the first time in my writing career, like I was like tearing up because I was just so happy when I was writing some of the scenes. Like I just loved how cozy the book was and so hope filled. I loved the just how beautiful the spring nature. That I was so grateful that I could kind of capture that all in a story that was more leaning towards like sparkly and hopeful than dark and bleak like my other books. So I just really enjoyed the experience of writing this book. And yeah, like my hope is to pass that joy along to readers to help them feel like they're escaping into this like joyful, beautiful spring, season of Korea.
Honestly, yeah, I think actually I've been reading some of the other ARC reviews as well as I was in the middle of the book and then when after I finished. And yeah, I've been seeing I think a lot of those responses. Like I think the readers are definitely experiencing all of what you just described, myself included. So
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I think it's just gonna keep going up once the book is out there in the world as well. I think everyone's gonna love it.
Yeah.
I have one more question before maybe we do a rapid fire round. And I don't know how much you can tease about your upcoming novel. You mentioned it a little bit earlier already, but yeah, are there any details, anything small that you can share with people to kind of expect?
Yeah, sure. So it's going to be more of an adventure novel. So I've always loved the wilderness, so I want a story where it's more focused on the wilderness of Korea. So it's going to be an adventure novel. It's going to be set in one of the most devastating times of Korean history. And there will be a very subtle romance.
Okay. Sounds a lot different, but I feel like that's something I might read too. So I think everyone, yeah, we all have something to look forward to already. That next book. Since we have time, I was gonna do like rapid fire like
Sure.
question round. Okay, one word to describe Behind Five Willows.
Whimsical.
Okay. Your second favorite Jane Austen novel.
Persuasion.
Okay. I've yet to read that one. Okay. Morning or nighttime writer?
I used to be a night, but now I'm morning.
Do you write with music or in silence?
Music.
1995 BBC or the 2005 PMP adaptation?
Everyone thinks I'm a 2025 girly, but I'm actually 1995 girly. Hands
Okay.
down. Yes.
Okay. I had a feeling you were going to say that, but I still need to watch 1995 when I've only seen the recent
Classic.
one. I've heard that. Okay. And recent favorite read?
Recent favorite read would be Anne Lang's If Such an If. It's basically a girl accidentally sends hate emails to the main protagonist guy, and Anne Lang's books are super fun.
Okay. And then last one, book that you've written that you would recommend everyone to start with.
Ah, I would say The Red Palace. It's the most June book.
Wow. Actually, I actually added an extra question because you were going through them so fast. That was unexpected. One more actual final question. Actually, people want to learn more about you, about all the books that you've written, actually, where can they find you, connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram at June H Writes. I'm also on TikTok, but my TikTok is just like a place I experiment TikTok videos, so you don't need to follow me there. Just yeah, Instagram is where I'm at.
Sounds good. Well, actually, thank you again for coming on to Fully Booked. And yeah, like I said, I think we all can't wait for Behind Five Willows to be out
Thank
in
you
the
so
world.
much for inviting me.
Thank you so much again for watching this interview. Honestly, it was just such a great conversation overall, and I just love getting to have conversations, interactions with authors. I think they are the most wonderful and amazing people out there. I know some of you guys would probably prefer that I would do more frequent episode uploads, but because of the season that I'm currently in, as well as stuff going on with the podcast behind the scenes, I am going to be pushing the next episode a bit further out, so normally the next episode should have been out in 2 weeks from now, which would be June 2nd, but I am pushing the next one to June 9th just because of things going on. So I hope you guys can be patient with me and wait for that. But if you are subscribed to this YouTube channel, then you can get notified whenever any new episodes or videos are uploaded. And again, it is just a free way to support Fully Booked. Otherwise, if you regularly listen to the podcast, rate and review wherever you are listening from. Having said all that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.